Where's my title go? One, I want to start by thanking Emma for the opportunity to present at the conference this year, and also about whippoorwills and ecosystem health in the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. My co-authors are Amanda Dillon, who's here in the back of the room, she's our field ecologist and entomologist, and Dr. Steve Campbell, their conservation biologist. And there's a nice picture of the preserve when we're out in the morning, actually doing mass banding. But we have an outline. I'm going to start with a little bit about eastern whippoorwill ecology, which you all probably know well. A little bit about pine barrens and the preserve, and then talk about what we're doing to restore ecosystem health. And then look at both our community, what our community science, our volunteers, data collection is telling us, and how that led to some staff research that I'll finish with. Eastern whippoorwill is one of the most obvious woodland creatures that you'll never see. If you've heard one, right, it's one of the most enigmatic sounds in the forest, in the woods. But if you go out at night, this is typically what you'll see of eastern whippoorwill. They are nocturnal, right? They are extremely cryptic during the day, almost impossible to find, and their breeding ecology is very much tied to the lunar cycle. In particular, I find it extremely interesting that their eggs are laid so that they hatch approximately 10 days before the full moon, maximizing the bird's ability to see its prey. Why study eastern whippoorwills? Well, eastern whippoorwills, as you just heard, most birds in North America and around the world, but eastern whippoorwills are in significant decline. This is based on the entire data set from the Breeding Bird Survey. Of course, the Breeding Bird Survey is diurnal, so it's not a great indicator of eastern whippoorwill, but by all objective measures, eastern whippoorwill is declining throughout most of its range. And in New York State, they are a high priority species of greatest conservation need. They are a Fish and Wildlife Service at-risk species, and Partners in Flight gave them a score of 14 out of 20, which is pretty high. And in New York State, we have 2 breeding bird atlases that have been completed. The third is in progress now, and I believe in its 5th year. But you can see between 1980 and the 2000 breeding bird atlas, there's a significant decline of eastern whippoorwills across New York State, with a couple of exceptions up around Fort Drum, on Long Island, and a few spots up in the Champlain Valley. No one knows exactly why whippoorwills are declining. It's believed, of course, habitat loss and destruction, but also a loss of their food prey. In particular, as a result, that they're primarily eating the giant silk moths with their large moths, which have been decimated by biocontrol for spongy moths. But there are a variety of reasons why whippoorwills are declining. But even where habitat is still ample, it's not exactly clear why they're declining, which is why we're trying to study them. Their habitat seems to be tied more to structure than species composition. They really seem to prefer very dry, relatively open canopied, open pine woodlands. But again, structure is more important than species composition. And this is a picture of the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. One of the habitats that whippoorwills seem to prefer across the Northeast are the archipelago of pine barrens that are scattered across the Northeastern United States. They've been absent from the Albany Pine Bush for about 30 years, which is why we were so interested to start studying them when we started detecting them, as you'll see. But the Albany Pine Bush is the best remaining example of an inland pitch pine scrub oak barren in this open canopy pitch pine woodland with an understory of scrub oak, but it's kind of a savanna within a savanna. You've got prairie grasses and wildflowers in the interstitial space between the scrub oak, and then you've got that open canopy of pitch pine and occasionally oak trees. It's the type locality for the endangered carnivorous butterfly, which a lot of people have heard about. Species we spent a lot of work on, but it's also an IBA. It's a bird conservation area by New York State, and it's a national natural landmark. So it's a pretty unique and special place. And it supports a large variety of rare species, and like all pine barrens, it is fire dependent. So this, much like hydrology and wetland drive wetland ecology and pine barrens, the entire ecology is driven by relatively frequent wildland fire. And these habitats are really a relic of both the soils. They exist on these great, extremely dry, droughty, nutrient poor, sandy soils, but also it's a relic of indigenous fire stewardship, which is what we believe helped to create and maintain these ecosystems prior to European colonization. And for us, the law that created the preserve and the commission is all about pitch pine scrub oak barrens. So we take an ecosystem-based strategy, system-based strategy to our work. We're ultimately looking at restoring a viable pitch pine scrub oak barrens. And of course, that viability is how do you measure viability? We do that by we're restoring ecosystem viability using a variety of tools, prescribed fire, of course, but also other mechanical, chemical tools, and planting alone and in combination with fire. All of this is really about restoring the altered fire regime. But ultimately, our question is, are we advancing ecosystem viability? And how do you know that? Well, one, of course, we can measure how often and how frequently we're putting fire on the ground, but really, right, I live in a house. I don't know how ecosystem viability in a pine barrens. The wildlife does, though. So if we look at the distribution and abundance of those key species that really depend on this habitat, like corner blues, like whippoorwills, and track that over time, that's probably our best indicator of whether or not we're actually improving ecosystem viability. We listen to the wildlife and let them tell us if we're actually improving things or not. And we do this across a variety of taxa, but birds, as you know, are incredible bioindicators and respond pretty quickly to changes in habitat conditions. So we do a lot of diurnal bird work, of course, and this suite of 6, this is a paper that was published in 2010. But the suite 6, we call them. If we have all 6 of these, it's a pretty good indication that we're in high quality pine barrens. But in particular, the prairie warbler was by far the single best indicator of the highest quality barren. But in doing our bird work and spending time early in the morning and late at night, in 2007, we started hearing whippoorwills in the preserve again. And we don't have data from the preserve, but talking to locals, they used to be common in the 50s and 60s, and they've been absent since the 70s or early 80s. So easily 20, 30 or more years, they've pretty much been gone from this landscape, best we can tell. But in 2007, we started hearing birds, single birds early in the season, then they disappeared. Same thing in 2008, 9, 16. It wasn't until 2018 that we started hearing multiple birds and consistently across the breeding season. And in 2019, we had our first indication of breeding, and we've been tracking them in 2020, 2021, and 2022 as well. So our community scientists, our citizen scientists, community scientists, sorry, utilizing our trail system and our point count system that we use during the day, went out at night to sample whippoorwills using standardized methods, the nocturnal night car surveys methods. And the green circles represent the areas where birds have been detected consistently. The red circles represent they were not. Because we started picking up birds consistently, we decided that we wanted to try and figure out where these birds actually occur in the preserve and how are they utilizing the habitat. Are they preferring habitat that we're managing in the preserve? And what management has occurred, and can these birds tell us something about the efficacy of that habitat management? This is myself, of course, Dylan, Steve, and then Tom Williams, one of our seasonal seasonal bird employees. So the methods we use with target netting at night for the recording. To capture the birds, naive birds come into the net relatively quickly, most of the time. And then we were using the low-tech pinpoint GPS 10s, which weigh about 1 gram, putting those on with a figure leg loop harness onto their back. And these are data loggers. So the idea is these are pre-programmed with specific times to get fixes on the birds. So we put them on the bird, release it, and then go back and try and catch that bird 3 weeks later before they stop singing and the territory falls apart. And it seems between us and talking with our counterparts in Massachusetts, it's like June 24th seems to be the magic date where after June 24th, forget about it. You're not going to catch them. And just like the prairie warblers, we've done a lot of bird banding and tagging on with the naive birds are pretty easy to catch. Birds that you've caught before, not so much. And you can see here's Dylan extracting a bird. You can see the data logger there and one on the far right on its back. And we're interested in breeding season activity. So we're exclusively looking at what these birds are doing in the breeding season so they can tell us something about habitat management. We ended up over the course of 3 years, we skipped 2020 because of the pandemic. We caught a total of 7 birds. In 2019, we caught 2 males, recaptured both of them, and much to our surprise, I was delighted that when we recaptured the first male, lo and behold, there was another bird in the net, female with a full-blown brood patch, which is really the first documented evidence of these birds actually breeding in the preserve in decades. So we were ecstatic about that. And that's the female that Dylan's holding in that middle slide. The males have the white on the outer tail feathers, the female does not. got 3 birds in 2021, and there in 2021 there seemed to be 8-10 whippoorwills in the preserve, and for whatever reason, we spent a ridiculous number of hours, but we could not recapture those 3 males in 2021, but we had 1 in 22 that we were able to recapture. So we have data from 3 birds. So there are 3 birds here. So there's orange, blue, and green is what I'm going to call them. So you can see the deployment dates for the data loggers, and the number of days for each bird. So green, we had 13 days, 23 days for blue, and 13 days for orange. So these are the data loggers. They have a limited battery life. So we pre-programmed them to get fixes at certain times, thinking about the bird's biology. So it's summertime. So right after sunset, so 10 o'clock at night, 1 a.m., 4 a.m., and then every other day at noon, hoping that because the birds are sedentary during the day, hopefully near a nest, we might get an indication of where they're spending their day and where nests might be. And you can see the number of fixes, but this actually exceeded our expectations on the number of fixes we expected to get out of these data loggers, which is phenomenal. And you can see the areas used by these birds, and we'll look at these more closely, but green had the female with the brood patch, had a very discreet, very relatively small 32-acre or 13-hectare area used. And these are 100% minimum convex polygons, so we encapsulated all. We didn't extract outliers or anything yet. It's still preliminary data. Blue basically covered around 100 acres, but had a couple of excursions outside of that area. And as you'll see, orange was a really interesting character. He was in about 200 to 300 acres consistently for about 2 weeks, and then ventured south a couple of miles in one night and back to the preserve, then ventured north for 2 nights, 6 miles, and then came back to the preserve. On the night, we happened to be out there trying to recapture him. And we got him. Low, you know, the luck of the draw. But you can see a wide variety of areas that those birds use. So here's green, and green was relatively sedentary. The lighter dots are the diurnal, the noon fixes, and the green dots are the various times at night when they're out foraging. And this bird in particular, so we recaptured him with this female over here, actually. But he spent all of his days here, and this is all relatively open pitch pine forest. But he had a couple of exceptions. It's a little bit denser over here where they seem to roost a lot, and this is a hardwood stand of mostly black locust. So non-native invasive tree that we've actually now removed. So it'll be interesting to see if we recapture this bird. This is the one bird that we have seen in multiple years. But interestingly, using a variety of habitats, both open canopy and some closed canopy habitats. Same story for blue. Blue had a little bit larger range, but most of its activity, we captured and recaptured them over here. But most of its habitat use seemed to be out in the open barrens. But yet it was roosting during the day in this denser stand of pitch pine, almost exclusive clean stand of pitch pine forest, with a couple of excursions, and spent one day way out there. And that's not quite a mile. But relatively sedentary, and this area had at least 2, if not 3 birds in 2021. So we believe that this bird probably mated, but we don't have any evidence of that. And here's orange. This is just, we were flabbergasted when we loaded the data for this bird. So we captured, let me just skip ahead. So we captured him across, this is the main county highway here. We captured him in open canopy habitat across the street and recaptured him here. And he spent most of his time in the preserve, as you can see. Here's the preserve map, by the way, shaded area. So you can see all 3 birds did spend most of their time in the preserve, which is good to know. But then if we drill in a little bit, you can see daytime was an open habitat for him, but at night, almost every night, I don't know what was over there for food, but almost every night this bird was venturing across the railroad tracks out of the preserve, again into what's a dense stand of mixed forest, black locust, oak, and pitch pine. But went over there almost daily, and this is not an area that's protected yet. But it's interesting to us that this bird flew, right? He spent 13 days here in this area. Day 14, small excursion, came back that night. Day 15, went 3 miles south and then came back that same night. And then on day 16, went up here, spent the day, was here at 10 o'clock at night on the 17th. And then at 1 a.m. on the 18th, he was back in the preserve. And we were able to recapture him. Not sure what's going on with that guy. So one of the things that we've discovered that we didn't know is that almost like grouse that use across their annual cycle, they're using multiple cereal stages. The preliminary data anyway suggests that these birds are not exclusively open canopied habitat birds, that they are using some closed canopied habitats, suggesting to us that that habitat heterogeneity is probably an important feature to maintain on this landscape. And here you can see this open pitch pine scrub oak barrens and closed canopy pitch pine forest. So in conclusion, whippoorwills are back and attempting to breed in the preserve. It appears that our ecosystem restoration is creating favorable habitat. Thank you. Nope, that's perfect. It's been interesting to us that the more we manage and the larger and more contiguous open pine barrens we're restoring, the population of these birds does seem to be increasing over time. Again, that's all preliminary based on our citizen science work and what we're hearing out there. Like I said, they're preferring both open managed habitat and small stands of closed canopy forest. They remain extremely difficult to study, but highly informative. It was extremely frustrating, any kind of a wind, of course, stretches the net out, but to see a whippoorwill hit the net 3 times in one night and bounce out, or just as you're getting there to get the bird, flies away. Ridiculous number of hours that Bill and Steve and I put into this to get this data. But they're another indicator, we believe, of improving ecosystem function within this landscape as a result of our management. And restoring ecosystem health really seems to continue to produce unexpected benefits to the rare wildlife here. I knew whippoorwills used to be here. I never in a million years thought that during my tenure of managing this site that we would actually get whippoorwills back. Golden winged warblers also used to be really abundant in this landscape up until the 70s. So who knows? We're hoping. They may edge out a few prairie warblers, which are everywhere. So our next step, continue our community science and attempt to continue tagging more birds. We want to drill down and really evaluate the timestamps and the behavior of these birds and look for more clues. And continue to evaluate the impacts of habitat management. We're continuing to manage habitat where we now know we have birds. So we want to continue to monitor those birds and see what happens as we're managing habitats they're occupying. And New York State DEC, their biologist is this year embarking on a statewide project, basically following the work that we've been doing. So we're going to continue collaborating with DEC and our partners in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire as we continue to study these birds. And I want to thank you again for the opportunity, but also our community science volunteers and the New York State Environmental Protection Fund that has supported our work. Thank you. How are we doing on time, Allison? Do we have? All right, Dylan would be amazed that I left time for questions.
Great talking. Thank you.
Yes, so actually we've just wrapped up. Dylan could talk more about it. We just wrapped up a 5-year regional conservation needs project looking at pollinators and moths. So we've got a number of periodic samples of the moths, and of all of the xeric sites across New England and the Northeast that we studied as a group, the moths, our abundance and diversity of moths was ridiculously high. And pine barrens are famous for their moth communities, but honestly, I can't identify almost any of them. So we hired experts to do that. But yeah, the moth population seems very high. Not so much the giant silk moths that everybody seemed to think that they used to feed on, but there are a lot of moths, micro and macro moths in the preserve. So we think there's still plenty of prey.
And it's talking about how structured important versus compositions in non-native.
Yeah.
Do we know if black locust or moth species might be producing an abundance of food for
We do not know that. And interestingly, we've removed part of the reason why there's so much open habitat now for these birds is that we've removed about 400 acres of black locust over the last 20 years. Yep. But no, not that we know of. And the reason structure is so important, I should have mentioned right there. visual ambush predators. So they actually sally much like a flycatcher, sitting on a log or a branch and flying out when they see something. They're using the moonlight and the starlight behind that moth to see it and go grab it. So we believe the open structure is really important because it will allow them enough ambient light to see their prey. But yet we think they're utilizing the closed canopy sites to roost and just gives them more cover. 30 seconds. Wow, we just sucked up 2 minutes.
It's like a lot of your birds do a lot of their foraging on preserved land, except that one.
Yeah.
Across the tracks. Can you talk a little bit more about that location? And this opportunity and mechanisms to serve it?
There is, and it's actually one of the high priority spots that we've had for years that we want to add to the preserve. Yeah, so the preserve is currently 3,400 acres, and we're looking to build a 5,300 acre preserve. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's get a flashback to 50%. Thank you.
We're going to hear from Dan Mummert. He's talking to Regional Wildlife Recovery Biologist and the Archer Larned.
Where's that?
Okay, good morning. So I'll be talking about the Game Commission's Barn Owl Conservation Initiative that we've been, can't believe I've been working on this for 17 years now. So barn owls, they are the most widely distributed land bird throughout the entire world. There are 36 different subspecies of barn owls down on every continent except for Antarctica. If you look here, pretty much found on distribution here in green. So it's not so cold, so you don't see them like north of the Himalayas, or too arid, so you don't see them in the Sahara, but much throughout much of the other parts of the world. So worldwide, they're doing fine. Here in the United States, if you just look, distribution here, you can see that real well in the southern parts of the state, but they are considered threatened or endangered in 10 of our states. And those in orange here on the map, case. Mid-east there, up in the New England states, and then in yellow, they are considered species of conservation concern, so not threatened or endangered, but heading in that direction. So for Pennsylvania, they are considered near threatened. Wow. Just looking at Pennsylvania, look at the first spring bird atlas, which was done a 5-year study in the second half of the 1980s. Barn owls were found in 251 of the different atlas blocks, each atlas block being about a mile square. That is breeding evidence for barn owls. And you can see here, there was a square. They were found in all the different corners of the state, mostly found in south central and southeast, but every corner. And then 20 years later, we had our second breeding bird atlas for Pennsylvania, and they were found in only 117 atlas blocks. So 53% decrease just in those 20 years. And if you look, you can see that, pretty much 20 years later, very few in the northern half, very few out west, and those counties outside of Philadelphia, very few compared to the first atlas. So Game Commission, we're responsible for all wild birds and wild mammals in Pennsylvania and the conservation. So we started up a barn owl conservation initiative to learn more about these barn owls. We started it in 2005 and it's still continuing. We wanted to focus on a few different things. Learn more about their abundance and distribution across the state, and then how that trends over time. Figure out if there's any kind of way we can improve habitat for them, and learn more about longevity and dispersal of them. And then also get the public informed about what's going on with barn owls. The people that carry out our barn owl conservation initiative are 6 biologists. So what we call our wildlife recovery biologists, and each of us covers about 12 to 13 different counties. So I have the southeastern part of Pennsylvania. So to start this project, basically, we were really looking for feedback from the landowners, the farmers mostly throughout the state. So we just got the word out. We started talking to newspapers about how we were going to start this new initiative. We sent out flyers and had them all over the place in local newspapers, and just looking for anyone who knows where barn owls are nesting to contact us. And so they did. And so I started getting, we didn't have any equipment at this time. We were just going around. We had a truck and a computer, and that's about it. So we went to these different locations. They gave us like broken ladders with broken rungs. And we would like climb up into their silos and check, and some of these were successful. Some of them actually did have nesting barn owls. Others, a lot of the others were pigeons, so we got a lot of pigeons called. But this is where we found out about the nesting of almost all the successful barn owl sites that we found throughout the state was from landowners contacting us. Most common sites, as you can imagine, were in barns and silos. They would nest on the sides of the big broad rafters on the sides of these barns, and sometimes up on the top of these silos. One interesting thing is historically, before there were barns and silos in the landscape, where barn owls would have been nesting, so large tree cavities. And we only found throughout the study, we've only found tree cavity nesting barn owls at 2 sites. But that's not to say that there's a lot of other barn owls in these tree cavities, because we're not going out and checking every tree in Pennsylvania. Some unusual places that we found nesting barn owls. This one here, this is in a park, and there's this lip around this pavilion on the inside, and they were tucked in nesting underneath that pavilion, which was really interesting. And this one here, this is a very expensive bat condo that can hold thousands upon thousands of bats. Bats had never used it, to my knowledge, so we had barn owls nesting in here for several years. What we learned, so since 2005, the 6 of us diversity biologists were able to find barn owls nesting at 205 different locations throughout Pennsylvania. On average, if you look at this graph, this is by year. So this starts with the years 2005 and goes all the way to 2021. And this is number of active nest sites. So here's 50, you see up to 70, back down to 60. The highest numbers, most we ever found in Pennsylvania was 2013 and 2014, where we found 75 active nest sites for each of those different years. And then we had this huge drop down to about 35 the following year. And I don't know what happened during that. I don't know if it was a weather event or I don't know what reason. But since then, barn owls really have declined in population. And so last year, 2022, we can only confirm nesting at 26 different sites throughout Pennsylvania. So very steep decline. But if you look at the first half of this study, we were averaging about 60 to 70 active nest sites. Second half of the study, only about 40 to 50. So here's a map showing Pennsylvania and where we've been able to confirm barn owls nesting. The enclosed circles, the enclosed black circles, are where they were successfully nesting in 2022. Open rings like this are where they nested. They did not nest in 2022, but they had nested at least 1 year prior. And if you see these red rings, those were brand new sites found in 2022. But you can see their distribution mostly here in this whole area, southeast, south central Pennsylvania, and just a few outside that area. Ways that we're trying to improve habitat for barn owls. The main thing is just putting out barn owl nesting boxes. And the main reason for this is, for example, there's great grassland habitat, but there wasn't a good cavity for them. So no good barn or other kind of structure where they can nest. We're put up a barn owl nest box in those areas. These barn owl nest boxes also provide a much safer location. So I've seen I've seen barn owls where I climb up to the top of a silo and there's like this concrete ring around the outside with no lip. And so they'll just lay their eggs right on top of that. And I've seen nestlings fall down to the ground or eggs fall to the ground. So these barn owl boxes provide a much safer location for the nest. And one thing with this project is most of these barn owl boxes were made and donated by volunteers, citizen volunteers. So huge help from the public with this project. Here's how my favorite way to install them is put them on the inside of a barn and having the entrance facing out. And then cutting a hole in the barn wall so that the owls can go right from the outside into the inside of the box. And that just makes for a great location. It's weather temperature fluctuation isn't that much as compared to being on the outside. Other ways that we'll install them, we'll put them up on silos like this. And I learned quick to get over my fear of heights with this project. As you can imagine, it's still friendly and crazy, but a lot of these are used. We can put them on posts like this, and we put them on posts. We make them a really sturdy post. I've seen a lot of people put them on posts that you know, when you get a strong breeze, it really makes them blow, and they'll just abandon those. So we use 6x6 posts that are 16 foot tall. Put them 4 feet in the ground, so the box itself is about 12 feet off the ground. And when all goes well, you know, we get barn owls using them. When it doesn't go well, we get cats. But you know, if we don't get barn owls using them, typically we'll see a few being used by pigeons. Kestrels use them, which is fantastic. We love that. This is the only box that I've seen cats actually using one of my barn owl boxes. And the one that really freaked me out was we get to the top of a silo and I see a raccoon instead of a nest box. I don't know how it got up there and how it's living up there, but that was the case. Altogether, we've gotten out over 340 nest boxes, you know, throughout the state. Typically, about 75 to 80% of, you know, we check these boxes each year, as well as other sites. And we've seen that about 75 to 85% of the active nest sites that we confirm each year are in nest boxes that we put out there. But then the question is, you know, how many other barn owls are out there on the landscape? Because there's 6 of us, so we're not checking every single barn and silo across Pennsylvania, and we're certainly not checking tree cavities. So, you know, really, how many barn owls are out there? Another thing that we have going on to help people better manage land for not only barn owls, but all grassland birds, all wildlife, is this program called the Private Landowner Assistance Program. So the 6 of us biologists also carry out this program, where it's a free service where anyone with at least 25 acres of land can call us and we consult them on how to better manage their property for diversity of wildlife. And since this program started at the same time as the barn owl project, we've consulted over 1,900 landowners and covering over 309,000 acres. And a lot of that has been for, you know, helping create better grass and habitat for barn owl and other birds. Getting into banding now. So, you know, the way we ban these barn owls, we're monitoring the sites, so we know basically we go back to sites when the young ones are about 4 to 7 weeks old. You know, they fledge around 8 weeks, and go to the sites. You know, get up there, and as soon as I start climbing the ladder, usually that's when the adult like takes off. So it's nothing like peregrines where they, you know, we have to wear like special equipment because they're going to attack us. They just head right out. They don't protect the young ones at all. Yeah, you're on your own. Good luck. But when we, you know, open up the box, and those, you ever heard barn owls? They're just hissing and making all kinds of loud sounds. And really, it's like an echo chamber with that nest box. So we open it up, they're hissing. I'll just reach in with the glove hand, pull out the first one, and then I'll have these cloth bags, and each barn owl gets its own cloth bag. So I'll put them all in cloth bags, lower them down to the ground. If I'm up in a silo, you know, we have an extra long rope, and we'll lower the whole thing down to the ground where someone is, and they'll start getting them out of the bags. This guy here, he's about 4.5 weeks old, 4.5, 5 weeks old. So perfect for banding. We use a size 7A band, you know, for our barn owls here. Just talking to someone else and they said in Europe, the European barn owls are much smaller and they use a size 6. Well, here in North America, we use size 7A, lock-on band. And take some different measurements. So we measured the P7 feather, and I have a chart that's Bruce Colvin, he came up with this where we can tell exactly how many days old that barn owl is by how much is unfurled from the pin. We'll wait. They're always calm like this, always. Usually I put them in a knit hat that I have specifically, my barn owl hat. And one interesting thing with these barn owls is that they will nest almost any time of year, especially in the tropics. But here I found that some extremely late second clutches. This one here, it's often in Orchard in Lancaster County. And they're often the first ones that I band in the spring. I'll often band them in late May. And they consistently have been having second clutches. 3 years ago, they had their second clutch right around Thanksgiving. This one, and this one, 2021, I banded them 2 days before Christmas. And this one still has a couple weeks before it's going to be fledging. So imagine fledging in early January. And barn owls, they already have a 75% mortality rate for their first year of life. So imagine what their mortality rate is when they're fledging in the middle of winter. And one thing we don't know is, the landowner, he's the one who told me that they were having, these second clutches. I don't have time to be going around to all the different sites looking for second clutches. So what percentage of our barn owls have these second clutches? That's another good question there. What we've learned from banding, so we've banded a little more than 2,500 nestling barn owls since we started this project. Oh, I love the wood trash. We've gotten 131 returns, from these barn owls. What we've learned is that median dispersal has been right around 23 miles from where we banded to where they were recovered. But that has really ranged from very close to the natal site to over 900 miles away from the natal site. Direction, there doesn't appear to be any distinct direction on which way they're going. Median lifespan, we found that on average they're only living about a year, but on average. But that first year is crucial. Like I said, 75% don't make it to their first birthday. A lot of starvation happening, especially that first winter. But the oldest one that we found so far was lived to be 8 years old. It was a bird that was banded in Virginia, came up to Pennsylvania, recovered in York County, Pennsylvania, and there was a note that said that cat had been caused of its death. So here's a map showing these dispersals. So you can see one here ended up in North Carolina, a couple going up to New York State, one went to Rhode Island, one from Ohio came to Pennsylvania. And this longest one, and one that I banded in Albany County, Pennsylvania, ended up in the Bahamas. If you can imagine that. I thought someone was playing a trick on us, but we actually ended up contacting the person who recovered it, and sure enough, it actually did happen. So last thing is just getting the public interested in our wildlife and letting them know about birds like our grassland birds, like barn owls, are just declining at such a steep rate. And if we get our public excited about this, we can have them helping with conservation also. And getting kids to these band events is really helpful. So with that, hopefully there's a minute or two left for questions. Question?
Yes, you said you put on a glove tree with the chicks from the box.
Oh, yeah, I just use a regular leather glove because because of their talents. So once I get them out of the box and I'm doing the actual banding, I don't have the gloves on unless there's no what's going on first. Yeah, it's just because they do have a lot of strength with them.
Can you determine your net box to shoot where he's got owls, or do you work going to the front? Or you're not
Yeah, well, so focusing on areas relatively, in the same general landscape, is where we know that there's barn owls, but they do disperse good distances. So, really, it's looking wherever we still have good grassland habitat, because that becomes such a rare thing. So if there's good grassland habitat and, such a placement, like a barn, we'll put it in. That, oh, I didn't even talk about that. So that's one thing that we're gonna be starting this year, is we're gonna start drawing blood samples from barn owls and looking to see if toxins such as rodenticides, and we're also, I want to look to see if West Nile viruses have an impact on their population as well.
About some time in 2013, could be West Nile.
It's a great question, and I don't know. And that's one thing that we're going to start looking at, is that's one of the main reasons why we're going to start drawing blood samples, is to see if West Nile is potentially a cause for whatever time.
Well, that's the species, so, history of combined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's something we want to look at, definitely.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Let people in our view, sit up here for the 8+ students in the room in front, take good notes. So just don't be shy and grab these seats. So at the end of the day, when we have our quiz, you can do yourself. Next, we're going to the shelter, and you can do for the Featherbed Lane Banding Station in New Jersey. And they're going to tell us about the relationship between Japanese silkworm and ground foraging songbirds.
So these two photos were taken right next to Miss Neck at our station, and you don't really need to observe it to notice that there is one plant that seems to be dominating the ground floor. And that is Japanese silkworm. From up close, it kind of looks like a miniature version of bamboo. You've probably seen it, and it's an invasive introduced from Asia, and it's been populating the banding station floors in the past few years. So Ethan and I were curious to see if this grass had any impact on avian life. So we talked to Ernest Others, who has been running the station for many decades, and who I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And we took a dive into the past data that's been collected over the station for many years, to see if there were any trends that we could find related to Japanese silkworm and ground foraging songbirds. So the three birds that we focused on were ovenbirds, wood thrushes, and veery. The main bird of focus being ovenbirds, and all these birds are ground foraging songbirds that rely on dead leaf litter to forage for insects and construct nests. So with the introduction of Japanese silkgrass, it poses concern for the ground coverage of dead vegetation as the ground will be populated by plants. And just some background on Japanese silkgrass, as I mentioned, it was introduced from Asia around the 1920s as packing material, and it's an invasive, and it spreads very rapidly, as many invasives do, producing up to 1,000 seeds annually per plant.
Additionally, according to eBird status and trends, ovenbirds show mixed population trends. They're declining in most of the Northeast, but in more northern regions, such as Eastern Canada, Maine, and New Hampshire, other populations are increasing. There's also other areas of population increase scattered around the tri-state area, one of which being central Jersey, where the banding station is located. Additionally, we decided to focus on ovenbirds because they're considered model organisms by many ornithologists because of their wide distribution, abundance, and distinctiveness, and they've been used in scientific studies for many years.
So there isn't a lot of current literature on the direct impact of Japanese fieldgrass on songbirds. There were a few studies published, such as one in 2013, that suggested that invasive grasses like Japanese fieldgrass negatively impact the nesting habitats for ground nesting songbirds because of their negative impact on invertebrate densities. On the other hand, there was a study published in 2015 that looked at veeries, and it actually found that veeries preferred nesting in patches of denser vegetation, largely populated by non-native plants. Not really sure why, but yeah, there isn't really a general consensus in the current literature on the impact of Japanese fieldgrass on songbirds. So we're curious to explore that out further.
So the two primary methods we used were the singing male census and the monitoring agent productivity and survivorship habitat structure assessment, or MAPS habitat structure assessment. So in the singing male census, the surveyor walks along designated paths and plots all the birds they hear on a spot map, recognizing them by their distinctive song. And they usually do this from May to throughout the breeding season during the summer. And they tally them at the end of the season to get a better overview of the population. And most of these birds are singing males because, like, during the breeding season, they'll sing to both attract mates and to defend their territory. So it provides an overview, like an insight into their population. And the other main method we used was the MAPS habitat structure assessment, and it records various information about habitat. But we focused on dead vegetation ground cover because dead leaf litter is really important to autumn birds with rushes and veeries for emerging. And we also analyzed hatchery data, both to provide more information about the reproductive success of autumn birds at the banding station, but also to compare how their behavior differs from adult autumn birds.
So the first thing that we looked at with the data is general population trends for ovenbirds at the station. So this graph is looking at the number of singing male ovenbirds in two fields, field 2 and 3, over time from 2013 to 2022. Just the background of the two fields, field 2 is wooded shrubland and field 3 is scanty growth woods, which tends to be more conducive to siltgrass growth because of the open forest floor. So generally, you can see some fluctuation in both fields, but it appears that field 2 is roughly increasing from 2013 to 2018, and then sort of fluctuates, and it looks like it's kind of plateauing. And then field 3, similar trend from 2013 to 2017-ish, and then it seems to be making field 2 similar plateau. So we think is potentially happening is that ovenbirds from field 2, from field 3, which has historically been in more ovenbirds, are moving to field 2, which is less populated by Japanese siltgrass. So this graph just kind of elaborating on the previous suggestion that maybe ovenbirds are moving from field 3 to field 2. We kind of see that in the hatchery. So this graph is looking at the total number of ovenbird hatch years captured per year from 2013 to 2022, again in the two fields. You can see that, especially in the middle of the graph, there's mostly there's a larger number of hatch years captured in field 2, and just generally looking at the graph, the two fields seem to be sort of fluctuating in conjunction with each other. We think that the fluctuation can be explained by different weather events. For instance, in 2017 here we see a drop, and we think that might be due to Hurricane Harvey, which knocked down a few trees. And then again here in 2019 we see another drop, and we think that might be due to the fact that 2019 was the wettest year on record, so that might have flooded a lot of the groundness. And then here in 2020, we've seen increase in both fields, and that was the year of the those 17-year-old cicadas that we all love. Yeah, but coming back, generally the two fields fluctuate together, but there are two parts where they sort of overlap. One's in 2015 here, and then again in 2022, with the bigger shifting in 2022. Not exact why this happened here in the most recent year, but we think that it could be due to the derecho windstorms, which knocked down a lot of trees in field 2 particularly, which let in a lot of light in the canopy, and which allows for on-ground vegetation project to thrive, and that was reflected in the dead vegetation percentage ground covers in the two fields actually. So field 3 had an 18% coverage of dead leaf litter, whereas field 2 had an 8%. So we think that the ovenbirds were gravitating towards the field with more dead leaf litter.
So here's a graph of the number of hatcher ovenbirds plotted against the dead vegetation cover. And it shows the expected trend with ovenbirds having higher populations in areas with higher dead vegetation ground cover, most likely because they have more area to forage. But here in field 2, it shows the opposite trend, and we're not exactly sure why, because it shows that ovenbirds prefer dead vegetation, but this may be because of the presence of other arthropods that may prefer Japanese silkgrass. Such as the crickets, like cricket nymphs, which were found at much higher densities in field 2 than field 3. And then here's a scatter plot with 125 different ground foraging songbirds plotted against the vegetation ground cover. And it shows the expected trends, but we still need more data to produce more conclusive results. And I produced another graph with only data from 2018 to 2022. Except that graph had a higher correlation, and that might be because of the various disturbances mentioned before with the weather before 2018.
So what we're seeing from all these different trends is that Japanese silkgrass increasing live vegetation cover on forest floors at the station could be related to decreased productivity of ground foraging songbirds. So we're hoping to further elaborate on this discussion by continuing to gather data for a larger sample size, as well as explicitly measuring the ground coverage of Japanese silkgrass, and looking further into hatchery data to see maybe, for instance, looking at the date of first capture for the hatchery to see if maybe ovenbirds are nesting earlier before the silkgrass gets too high, or if they're switching fields to fields with less silkgrass.
On a broader note, it would be beneficial to get more data for more conclusive results, mostly to provide more information about invasive grass management and to streamline their management plans, just so we understand the invasive species. And before we end, we just wanted to thank everyone at Featherbed Lane Banding Station. We're both relatively new banders who just started last year, but we've learned so much from them throughout the past year, and we just want to say thank you.
Question for Charlotte. Have you noticed any impact from deer browsing other understory plants that may allow more light in the program to grow? There's like deer population is pretty large, and they used to lay a lot of the more native understory. So I was wondering if that's one reason the towgrass.
Yeah, with the deer brown, there is a pretty large population of deer. We are actually around Eastern US, and yeah, it's what you're saying. cropping of the different like shrubs and like higher grass should definitely allow it to like lower vegetation like jogging stuff.
Any plans of doing, you kind of mentioned like the transition, plans to kind of do some like resurveys, okay.
Yeah, I think that looking more at doing further study on invertebrates would be really interesting, and it's something that we're considering doing more study on, especially I mean the hummingbirds and other the woodround engineers just working on having as well.
Yes.
Are you guys considering doing any sort of rules? Like fall, changing things?
Yeah, we are. We're thinking about implementing like this volunteers grabbing it out of the ground directly. But I know in other areas in central Jersey, like in Mountain Lake Preserve, they've tried to use vinegar sprays to kill the Japanese silkgrass, but that also has other implications because pH and that can interfere with like snails because it interferes with their formation of the shells, and that could impact wood thrushes negatively. So there's a bunch of other implications. So right now, our main method would probably be this mechanical removal.
Hi, good talk. Do you guys know what the, like, what's the distance between your field sites? I guess, like, do you know if there's movement between the sites, looks like bird center and slow turd? Yeah, how
They're pretty close together. So there is movement between the fields. The main reason why we like started with our hummingbirds actually is because we noticed some populations flipping. And we thought that might be due to stillgrass, so we decided to investigate further.
do you guys color band those birds, like to watch their movements at all, or is that something that you plan on doing in the future on it?
I think that would be interesting, but we haven't done that.
One more chance here?
It's the deep that like one thing does.
We haven't measured the like thickness of the layer, but if we were to do more studies on the invertebrate population in particular, like mentioned earlier, that would be something.
Thanks very much.
If y'all feel like some future conservation, we're only being involved for a year, I think that was tremendously impressive. That was great. Next we're gonna hear from Archer Larned from the Maryland Coastal Bay Program. And they'll tell us how floating islands successfully attracted common fern colonies.
Thank you. So again, my name is Archer Larned, and I'm going to talk to you about the floating island that you can hear, which attracted a common fern colony. And I'm from Maryland Coastal Bays Program, but this project is a collaborative project between Maryland's Department of Natural Resources and also Audubon Mid-Atlantic. There are a couple of my co-authors here as well, Dave Brinker, as I'll call last name, I'm sure, and then Kim Apple. So common tern, royal tern, and black skimmer deer are all Maryland state listed endangered, and this is due to dramatic population declines. And this graph is from colonial waterbird surveys. This is nesting pairs in Maryland coastal bays, and for these three species, you can see declines for all of these. It goes back into the survey since the 80s, and it's Similar, I'm just showing from 2003, and last year we went out, we didn't find any black skimmer nests. And there's one very marginal colony of royal terns. They don't end up fledging very many young, only just with 2 small natural colonies of common terns. We've since boosted that population, but for natural, there's just a few of those left. And so the reasons for this dramatic population decline, one of the main reasons is loss of nesting habitat. So all 3 of these species nest on sand islands in the Maryland coastal bays. And so these are being lost due to erosion of these islands from sea level rise and climate change impacted storms. And also changes in sediment dynamics. So an example, this is our 12, which is a dredge soil created island. And it's how it looked in 2017. There were birds nesting on it, and by 2022, on the picture I took last summer, there's not much left. And that's pretty much how it is with most of the islands in the Maryland coastal bays. So they're not being replenished naturally by the sand due to these changes in dynamics, the climate dynamics. So the mostly the Ocean City Inlet was stabilized after it was opened up during a storm in 1933, and that really changed the whole sediment transport system of the coastline. Also human disturbance. So just like birds like these little islands that are out in the coastal bays, so do people. And if you have people on these islands, you don't generally see birds nesting on them. And also predation. So blackback gulls, great blackback gulls, herring gulls, mammals, foxes, raccoons generally, and great horned owls. These are all natural predators of these bird species, but once you get to a low population size, any amount of predation is going to have a negative impact on their population. And so in response to this lack of nesting habitat, there's a collaboration between Maryland coastal bays, Department of Natural Resources, and Audubon Mid-Atlantic to create some nesting habitat quickly. And so rivers and barges have been used successfully for by terns and skimmers in other areas in Ontario, Canada, and Ohio, and Poland, and a bunch of different places, Virginia. And so we created one and nesting platform out in 2021. And the platform, so it's originally, so in 2021 is 32 by 32 feet. In size, and it was placed May 4th, so a bit later than planned due to permitting issues. But we saw the first common tern nest, or egg was laid June 23rd, and by the end of the season, there were 23 nests, which was amazingly successful for the first year that this was placed out there, and the first time this was in Maryland coastal bays. So the following year, so last year, 2022, more than doubled the size of the platform, so 48 feet by 40 feet, and it was placed on time. So right after the birds are returning from migration, April 12th. And so we saw the first common tern eggs laid between May 20th and 24th. And by the 26th, when we did the first nesting survey, there were about, I think, 22 nests. It was really successful putting it out earlier in the season. So the nesting platform, so this is a drone shot, and then this is one of the designs for it. So it's comprised of these individual rafts are 8 by 16 feet, and then these are paired and then connected via a metal connecting plate. So I'll show you pictures of it in just a minute. So these make 16 by 16 foot squares. And then these are all latched together. So the platform functions as one large unit, but it also, the latches enable it to flex and bend during storms, so it can absorb wave energy. And these in yellow from 2021, and so when it was increased in 2022, we added 5 new sections, so totaling 9. And some of the design elements that allow this platform to function. So these are custom made self-connecting latches. So these are what's connecting the 16 by 16 foot raft sections. And the reason why the rafts are 8 foot by 16 foot is because they have to be, the platform is removed in the fall and then returned to the bay in the spring. And so they have to fit down a boat ramp that's 14 feet wide. So we have wheeled dock floats so that the raft can be wheeled in and out of the boat ramp. And then with a frame base, which the raft, boards are put on top of, and the nesting raft is on top of these dock floats. And so it's moved around by this rollback. So it's stored in a field during the winter time, and then brought back out to the entered into the water via the rollback and wheeled down, and then it's connected. The 8x16 rafts are connected via these metal connecting plates. And we use crushed clamshell as nesting substrate. These are thread with rates, and that stays on. So this is just when we initially put it out there, so we don't remove the shells each winter. And then the 16 by 16 foot segments are all towed out happily to the site and then connected via these latches. So all these squares are connected to form the big nesting platform. And once the platform is in place, so it's held in position by these anchors, and there were significant storm events that the nesting platform survived with no damage. In 2021, Tropical Storm Elsa had wind gusts of 55 to 60 miles per hour, and you can see the raft up there rocking and rolling, but it didn't have any damage to it. Same last year, there was a nor'easter that sat there for about a week. Had sustained gusts of 20 to 30 and a map for 40 to 50. And again, it was rocking and rolling, but didn't sustain any damage. It was actually a neat concern out there during the storm. And you saw the picture of once the latch is latched, there's about a 4-inch gap. So to prevent chicks from falling into the water, anywhere where there's space where chicks can fit, we cover it. And there's also a sideboard, the 2x10, so placed all around the exterior, the outer perimeter of the raft to keep chicks on. We also have added these artificial plants, and then these like little lean-to fixture, and then this corn trees. The plants and the chick shelters form a visual separation for pairs, so we would often find terns nesting on either side of the plant or on either side of the chick shelter, and then the chick hide out in there during the daytime for shade and also protection from predators. Some of these design elements. So since the raft or the platform is way out in the middle of the bay, it's powered by solar panels. And then there's 3 car batteries in this big box. And those are powering, there's 4 cameras you can see on the center post. So this allows us to remotely monitor the platform at any time. So the cameras are, we can access them and control them from our, as an app on our phone. We can move them around, zoom them in and out. And it's also transmitting data. So it's recorded onto a hard drive. And there's a Wi-Fi hotspot in there as well. That's transmitting the data, and then there's marker lights on the 4 corners of the platform, so folks don't run into it at nighttime. And then there's a vocal lure during the day. So at the beginning of the season, we set out decoys, and we also have calls being broadcast. It sounds like there's a colony of terns, and this is very effective social attraction. This is being used for a lot of other colonials, water birds, puffins, and very effective. And so what we do out there each week, we visit the platform. We try to minimize the amount of time that we're actually on it to minimize disturbance to the birds. So we record nest locations and nest content, so eggs versus hives. And then also we watch the cameras at any time during the day to see what is going on out there, or night. And we also band adults and chicks, so we try to band 1 adult from each nest, and then all of the chicks that are that hatch. And that's to look at colony site fidelity. So these are long-lived birds to see if they're coming back, where they're going, all the data that you guys know can be gathered from banding projects. And some additions that we made partway through the season, we saw that birds that once they fledged they can fly away from the platform and land in the water, but they're not as good about getting back out of the water and onto the platform, so we. Right at the water level, so they can climb up onto there and then climb up the ramp and on their platform, and then this is called a little life raft. So they can fly, when they fly off and they land in the water, they can climb up on here, rest for a bit, and then they can fly back onto the nesting platform. They'll stay on the around the nesting platform after they fledge, and then they'll leave after that. And how much does something like this cost? So this is the total cost for the 2022, so the enlarged wrap size. It's 108,400. Majority of this is the wheeled dock floats, which was necessary for how we get it in and out at the boat ramp. And then also design and construction. We hired people that designed and constructed it, and then custom made ironwork. So we couldn't find anything that would work quite as well as those latches. And so what did the results from last year? So if you recall, it said in 2021 they had 23 common tern nests. So in 2022 we had 155, which was amazing. And again, it was put out earlier in the season and more than doubled in size. We also added plants. So we had 126 of the nests hatched at least one chick. They have anywhere from 1 to 3, and 156 chicks fledged that we know of. Some of these, we banded 159. Some of those might have fledged, and we didn't document it. We also banded 91 adults, and this is showing the nest accumulation. So as we found new nests over time. So for 2022, each week when we would go out and do surveys, there were about 15 to 20 new nests that we would find. And this is 2021. So again, it was put out later in the season and it was smaller. It was the first year. And we think that most of these nests are second brood. So the birds had already established nests elsewhere and probably failed, and then found this the raft, and then nested. But we didn't put any new nests after the end of July. And most of the times the common terns just have one brood. We did have a few in second brood for fail. And returning, so in 2021 they banded 19 adult terns on the raft, and we documented 15 of those that returned in 2022, which is a really great return rate. We're really excited. So this in about 3 weeks, we're going to be putting the platform back out. We're really excited to see how many of the birds returned from last year and the year before. We also had 4 other banded terns nesting on the raft. So there were 2 that were banded during the wintertime in Argentina. So it's about 5,000 miles that they were traveling. And then there was 1 banded as a chick in Poplar Island and 1 banded as a chick in Hampton Roads, Virginia. So we'll also be very interested to see where the chicks that we band, if they come back to the platform or if they go elsewhere. But they usually don't breed until they're 3 or 4, so we won't expect to see them for a little while yet. And fast. And I want to thank all the volunteers. So we have a huge crew. You can imagine putting this thing in the bay in the spring and then taking it out in the fall is a major effort. We have a whole crew of volunteers and also people from Maryland Department of Natural Resources and Maryland Coastal Bays and Audubon, all helping with this. And we also use volunteers during the summertime, helping with banding and anything else we do out there. Thanks for funding, and if I have questions. Like Poplar Island, and so we are out on the, I'm not sure mileage wise. So this, the Poplar Island is in the Chesapeake, and we're on the Maryland Coastal Bay, so on the Atlantic. Do you know the miles? Yep.
So this is awesome. First of all, we're going to talk about how does density and the success compared to a natural system. So looked at like how they're packed in there versus like so like off of island rates.
Haven't looked at the success rate, but the density is higher here than a natural colony, but it's at some of the other artificial rafts and barges and things, the density is much higher. So we could potentially see a lot more birds this year. But it is denser than natural.
David, the density of similar shell substrate on it. It's about 75 plus. Got lifespan low, what's the lifespan of the version? You can use.
Yeah, we didn't document any. There were gulls hanging out in the beginning of the season, but once the tern colony increased to, I think, once they had about 45 birds, they were able to keep. We had to like check again to see, but I don't think we had any depredation on there.
Prior to anyway, there'll be roosting birds like owls and sometimes parrots. Not rams, birds, yeah, were not favorites. As soon as the first egg went down, that behavior stopped. Almost like a switch. It's like, okay, now we're gonna get birds. We're gonna chase all these things. Until what else or anything on that. There was a gull once that watched the video, came in with a soft trap, and you know, it didn't stay in the raft more than 2 minutes. Great.
You've tried two sides of the grass so far. You feel like bigger is better, or do you think that it's the space better? Small ones that size.
I think bigger is better. No, we had black skimmer decoys out there in the beginning, but we didn't see any. I don't think we even had any flyby that we know of. Yeah.
Any issues or concerns about human vandalism?
No, we have signs and we do see boats around in there, but when they selected the area, they tried to pick an area that was away from most boat traffic. So it's pretty far from, well, relatively far from Ocean City, and it's away from the main channel, to try to avoid that. But we do have cameras on there, so if anything happens, we could see what happens.
Sounds like a